Welcome, everybody. I'm excited to be here with you today and introducing Marjorie and talking a little bit more about our book. Pat put a lot of work into gathering an amazing team when she spearheaded this project. 50 amazing women from all over the place, really. And Marjorie is one of such women. She is a communication confidence coach. She is the author of the #1 best-selling book, Empowering Business Owners to Overcome Speaking Fears, whether you're talking to one person or 1,000. For over 40 years, Marjorie has been coaching people to find their voice, overcome their fear of public speaking, and communicate with confidence and skill so they can reach their professional goals and share their gifts with the world. In 2017, she was named Top Speaking Coach of the Year, and in 2020, Top Motivational Speaker of the Decade by International Association of Top Professionals. So since she is the expert, I will turn it over to her. Welcome, Marjorie. We're happy to have you with us today.
Thank you very much, Renee, and I really appreciate being invited, and I appreciate all of the people who worked so hard to put this together. Now, it's interesting because when people think about public speaking, they think about giving a speech. That's what people think about. And actually, I define it as anytime you talk to somebody other than yourself. Because I have worked with people who have no problem whatsoever speaking to a big crowd, but ask them to go to a networking event, they got so much social anxiety that they don't want to do it. Pick up the phone, call somebody, oh my gosh. So these are all kinds of things where you're communicating with people, and that's not just in business. What happens when you're sitting at the family dinner party and your nosy Aunt Tilly asks you a question that's none of her business? How do you handle that without creating a family feud? And really, when you think about it, communication is the glue of society. It's the way we connect with other people. And I'd like to share with you a quote that I have in this book. It started out my chapter. It's my favorite quote about public speaking, and it's from my favorite American philosopher, Mark Twain. And a lot of people don't know that Mark Twain lost all of his book money in some type of boondoggle. So he made his money for the last part of his life going literally around the world and giving speeches. So he had a lot of experience with what we define as public speaking. And this is what he had to say. There are two types of speakers, those who are nervous and those who are liars. The truth is that we all feel somewhat nervous in certain situations. Some people have no problem with the phone or networking, but giving a speech to an audience is tough. Some people, as I said, can do the audience piece, but can't do the phone or the networking piece, or simply connecting with people. And if you are in business, for example, I think that the second most asked question in this world after "how are you" is some version of "so what do you do?" Or if it's a friend or a relative, "what are you up to lately?" And to be able to answer that in a way that's calm and confident and shares briefly, without sounding like a robocall, what you do is a really important skill to learn when you want to be effective, whatever your business is. And for many years, my business was volunteer business, and I was raising money for the Detroit Symphony Orchestra and a bunch of other organizations. A not-for-profit business is still a business. It's just the profit goes a different place than in a for-profit business. And like every other business, if you're out of cash, you're out of business. And how do you raise that money and get people to connect with you? It's through communication. It's become a cliche that people want to do business with those that they know, like, and trust. And it's become a cliche because it's true. And the way people really develop that know, like, and trust is through communication and showing genuine interest in other people and sharing what you do in a way that is valuable. So the question becomes, why are people so afraid of public speaking, of opening their mouths in various situations, whether it's a speech or going to a networking event or just simply saying something to a clerk at the store about something you need. Why are we so afraid? It's not like there's going to be a tiger jumping out at us, that a bolt of lightning coming down from the ceiling and is, smashing us to the floor. Fear. What is the purpose of fear, really? It's to keep us safe. And it's a very important thing to have. I mean, I don't know about you, but I would not choose to walk down a dark street alone at night in a bad neighborhood. I mean, fear is there to keep us safe, to keep us from doing stupid things, from driving 85 miles down the highway, or something like that. But when it comes to speaking, why are we afraid? It's not physical fear, it's emotional fear. We are afraid of feeling badly. And there are three basic fears, basically. Well, that's getting repetitive. There are three basic fears that operate. And the first one is fear of criticism or judgment. Now, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. Really? I don't know, that doesn't make sense to me. And I sometimes think that criticism is the go-to parenting strategy for civilizing us into somewhat civilized adults as we're growing up. And so as kids, we, generally speaking, hear a lot of criticism, and if not from our parents, certainly from teachers and so forth. And those old wounds, and they are old wounds because we had no capacity as little children to deal with the pain of being criticized. Those old wounds are still around. And so when somebody criticizes us, those old wounds get triggered and we kind of go right back to that little child that we were. And it makes it really hard for us to handle criticism. So in my chapter, I suggest a couple of ways to deal with it. First of all, know that what you have to share is of great value, that it makes sense, it's well organized, and it's clear and compelling. When you believe in the value of what you're sharing, that is the first crucial foundational piece of having confidence in speaking. And so when you share something and somebody denigrates it, let's face it, there are a lot of snipers and bullies around in this world who delight in trying to cut you down to size. And so when you hear one of these people, doing their sniper thing, do something that my husband once suggested to me. I owe him for this suggestion. I came home one day, I was doing some work in an organization, trying to change things, and you know how eager people are for change. They say the only one who truly welcomes change is a wet baby. And so the change I was proposing was not welcomed. So some people said some things to me that I was really upset about. And I came home and I told my husband, and what he said to me were these three words: consider the source. In other words, when somebody criticizes you, is this someone whose opinion you really respect? You need to come into your adult self. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to unplug the phone. I apologize. And so if that person is not somebody whose opinion you respect, then why in the world would you, pay attention to what that person has to say? The other thing you can do is realize that maybe you do not know 100% of everything there is to know about your topic. And if you're somebody who's open to growth and learning, maybe what this person is saying has some value. It may be what I call a good suggestion dressed up in unfortunate clothing. In other words, maybe somebody has a good idea and they really don't know how to share it in a way that is affirming and they don't know the sandwich method. In case you ever want to, suggest something to somebody, the sandwich method is the best way. What's the sandwich? The two pieces of bread are some types of appreciation or affirmation. I really was interested in what you had to say. There was so much value in it. There was one thing I was wondering about. There's an area that you didn't touch on that I'd really like to know about. Whatever. But in balance, it was really wonderful, something like that. So the other way, by the way, if you want to make a suggestion to somebody else, sometimes all you do is simply say, may I make a suggestion? And then you don't say anything. You do not say anything. You wait to see whether they're open to hearing what your suggestion is. And you do it very softly. May I make a suggestion? I will tell you, I have used this technique, which I learned from somebody, 30, 40 years ago, many times. No one has ever said no. Now, once I had to wait about 5 minutes to get an answer. You got to be patient if you use this one. But everybody's always curious. The bone of curiosity itches. So if you say, may I make a suggestion? And you're coming across not as somebody who's telling people things, which is, the things that one of the reasons we don't like being criticized is people tell us stuff. So it's a good thing not to tell other people things. And when they say yes, you might want to consider. So you say it very, you might want to consider, or, I had a similar situation and this is, or a friend of mine did this. This is what she did. I don't know if it'll fit for you, but here's an idea for you to consider. So that whenever you want to share something with somebody and not come across as if you're criticizing that person, making a suggestion is a powerful thing to do. And again, when somebody is saying something to you that feels like criticism, see if you can't come into your adult self, as it were, and see if there's something worthwhile to learn from that person. The second thing that we really, worry about is being rejected. And especially if you're in business and you were going to make calls or so forth, you're worried about people saying, no, it doesn't feel good. That's when your message comes in handy because you have a certain value to share with people. And there are certain people out in the world who need what you have to offer and can only hear it when you offer it. By the way, I never want to hear the excuse, yeah, I don't have to say it because there's so many other people who do this. Yeah, but there are people who can only hear it when you share it. So don't use that excuse for staying silent. So look at your sharing your message or calling as a sorting mechanism. If you sell widgets and you're talking to somebody who only wants gadgets, they're not saying no to you. They're saying no to what you're offering because they don't need it. Not everybody in the world needs what you have to offer. So rather than taking it personally and thinking they're saying no to you, if you're sharing what you're doing in an effective way, they're sharing no to what you're offering, not to you personally. It's really important to understand that difference. And there's several possible outcomes when you share something. Some people will say, yes, they need it. Oh gosh, I need that right now. Some people, it's not a fit. They don't need it. Some people will know oh, my cousin Tilly needs what you have to say. So that's the third thing. And the fourth thing, whether they say yes, no, or I know somebody, the fourth thing is you are planting a seed of future possibility. You're sharing with people what you do, and sometime down the road, a perfect example of this happened to me. I live in the Detroit area, and last December there was a speed networking event run by my chamber. And I thought, no, do I want to go driving tonight? Looks a little snowy. Well, I went. And I went and I talked to all these people, and I came home and thought, that was a waste of my time. Not really. About 3 or 4 months later, I got a phone call from this guy. He says, you don't remember me, but we met at this speed networking event. Okay. Uh, he says, I got to give this speech, and it's important to me to do it. But I'll tell you something. I am so afraid of giving speeches that if I get up there, I can't even see the audience. All I see is a gray wall. And I had given my card to my wife, and when I was complaining to her, she went and got your card and said to me, call her. So he called me, and we worked on, by the way, not simply the fear piece. Part of his problem was he shared his talk with me. And one of the things I help people with is with the messaging, because I'm a writer and a former magazine editor. And I said, you know, share this with me on a Google Doc. I love Google Docs, and we always record the session so they can, you know, hear every gem of wisdom that I share. And I read through his talk, and I said to him, Michael, that was his name. I said, Michael, you know, when I was at Michigan, I took a philosophy course, and I could understand that stuff more easily than what you've written here. I said, you know, there's a lot of good ideas here, but it's so confusing. And if I can't understand it reading it 3 times, nobody listening to you is going to be able to understand it. So we had to, you know, kind of, it was like pulling teeth. We had to pull out the 3 major points that he wanted to make. I had to help him clarify his thinking. And so we ended up with a talk that he had 3 major points. I helped him how he was going to start it, how he was going to finish it. He had a wonderful story to tell. I said, please use the story, because people love stories. And the interesting thing about it is, you know, I mean, we worked obviously a lot on the fear piece, but we used his talk as the basis. And I think he became so comfortable with that talk that really helped him with the fear piece. And what's interesting is he reported to me at our last session together that he was at an event, not the one where he was supposed to give this talk, but the speaker didn't show up, and they asked him to get up there and speak extemporaneously. And he said, I started running horror movies in my mind, and then I heard your voice in my ear telling me to change the channel. And he said, and I got up there and I gave my talk, and I got huge applause. And I think one of the reasons he was able to do this is because the points that he was giving were so clear in his mind. I had him practicing it. I said, I want you, when you're driving around, I want you to give your talk. When you're walking around the house, I want you to give your talk. I want you to get it so in your voice that it just spills out. And that's what happened for him. So it was really exciting. I was really thrilled that he was able to do this. And so he was really afraid of rejection, and that people would, you know, that would not accept his ideas. And he was able to do that. So that's the rejection piece. And the third piece, which kind of in a way sums up the other 2, is fear of failure. I mean, we're all afraid of embarrassing ourselves and looking stupid. And I don't want to seem, I mean, people I've talked to, you know, I'm not sure what to say, and I'm afraid I'll look like an idiot. And so part of that, again, goes back to knowing what you're going to say, your message, having it really clear in your mind. And part of it is a lot of the people I work with sometimes are really worried about being asked to speak about something where they haven't had the opportunity to prepare ahead of time. And so that's when they're afraid of failing. But the fact of the matter is that the only way to get good at something is to be willing to be bad at first. Think about it. I mean, did you ever, as a kid, take a musical instrument? I mean, did you sit down at the piano and after a week play a Beethoven sonata? I mean, think, what about a sport? If you picked up a tennis racket after a year or 2, are you ready for center court at Wimbledon? And the favorite example I like to share, which I share in the book, is about Thomas Edison. And he wanted to invent, he was determined to replace kerosene lighting. And he wanted to invent what we now call the incandescent light bulb. And he was using all types of possible materials for the filament. And he literally was using, he tried several thousand things. And he was in the midst of doing this when he was interviewed by a reporter who was asking him about the progress he was making on creating this constant source of light to replace kerosene lighting. And he mentioned that he had already experimented at that time, I don't know, 1,000 or 2,000 different things. And the reporter said to him, well, why are you keeping working on that when you failed so many times? And Thomas Edison said, I didn't fail. I just eliminated a bunch of stuff that didn't work. And so when you so-called fail at something, I would like to suggest to you how to handle things that don't turn out as well as you would like. Do not ever, ever say to yourself or ask yourself what went wrong. Focusing on what went wrong is a good way to discourage yourself from ever trying again. Instead, I'd like you to ask yourself 2 questions. First, what went right? What did I do that I'm really comfortable with, that I'm proud of, you know, that I feel worked really well, and that I want to keep? Second question, what needs to be tweaked? What needs to be upgraded? Now you get to the same answer in a sense of when you ask what went wrong, but you're getting to it from a whole different mindset. First of all, you get all those endorphins going when you acknowledge all the stuff you did well. And then you're in a place to say, yeah, and this didn't go over quite as well as I'd like. I think I need to change this a little bit, or this needs to be edited or adjusted. You know, I actually learned this method when I was active as a volunteer. I cannot tell you the number of events I chaired. And when you're working with volunteers, the first thing you're going to do to have them disappear on you is criticize them in any way. But on the other hand, when you have an event, you really do want to do an evaluation. So this is what I started doing. We started asking what went right, what do we want to keep the next time? What do we really acknowledge ourselves for? And everybody feels so good about it. And then I'd say, you know, where can we do even better next time? When you ask, where can I do even better next time? And you already acknowledge yourself for everything you did well. Can you see the power of that in terms of keeping you in a positive mind frame and willing to take the next step forward? Those are the things that are really helpful when you're dealing with something that is a so-called failure. And the title of John Maxwell's book says it all. Fail forward. Fail forward. Think about that. Fail forward. Because as I say, the only way to get good at something is to be willing to be bad at it at first. And it reminds me of an old, very old joke. A fellow goes up to a policeman in New York City and says, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? And the policeman answers, practice, practice, practice. So those are the kind of the gist of what I've shared. And I do want to share some of the things that are in the book. This is why it's so crucial for you to speak up. And what I listed as some things that I think is really important to remember. And these are reasons why it's really important to push yourself outside of the zone, you know, what I call the jail of your comfort zone. Everything you want is outside of your comfort zone, you know. And so, as Zig Ziglar says, a person with a strong enough why can endure almost any how. So here are some whys, reasons why it's important to really come into what I say, come into the power of your voice. You create positive relationships with family, friends, and people with whom you wish to do business. You serve those who may desperately need what you have to offer. When you allow your shyness, and by the way, I started my life as a shy introvert. In case you can't use that as an excuse with me. I didn't even start talking till I was 4 years old. So don't use shy introversion as an excuse with me. I don't buy it. You can get past it. I'm the living proof. But the fact of the matter is, when you do not share what you have to offer to the people who can only really hear it and accept it from you, you're cheating those people. You are cheating the people who need you and what you have to offer. So the other thing, you feel good about yourself and proud of what you're able to accomplish. You fulfill your personal and business goals. You grow into your full potential as a human being. Wonderful thing, isn't it? And you do your part to make this world a better place. That comes out of my tradition. The Jewish tradition teaches that we are God's partners in the repair of the world. Now, we're not obligated to repair the whole world, obviously. We're just obligated to repair our little piece. And we can't do it if we stay silent. Now, Henry David Thoreau said the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. I think people feel desperate because they stay quiet. They're afraid to speak up. And people who work in hospice say that at the end of life, people don't regret what they did do so much as what they didn't do. And why didn't they do it? They were afraid to speak it. They were afraid somebody would criticize it or reject it, or they would fail. And so they go through their lives keeping themselves small, feeling small, and beating themselves up for being small, especially at the end of life when the chances are diminished. So I also share with you some of my mottos. I have a lot of mottos. Misers make good ancestors. This is when when you have had an important job with a lot of responsibility and you end up, passing it on to somebody else. That happened to me a lot in my volunteer career. And it's a bittersweet thing because, that every important position comes with certain perks, but also certain responsibilities that you're glad to pass on. So this is my motto about this situation. It is better to be a has-been than a never was. Oh, and this is one of my favorites. Nothing improves your vision like company coming. And this is really important in business, this one. My jewelry is insured. Please keep my calendar safe. If you don't schedule it, chances are it won't get done. Oh, and this comes up from my career as a volunteer. A professional volunteer is someone who gets aggravated for free. Any volunteer is somebody who gets aggravated for free, actually. And houses, gardens, people, businesses are always in a state of becoming. There is no failure. As long as you learn the lesson, it has to teach you. I don't believe there is failure. If you let it stop you, it becomes a failure. If you learn the lesson it has to teach you, it just becomes it's a stepping stone. When you stay inside your comfort zone for too long, it starts to feel like a jail. And in life, there is no stasis. You are either shrinking or growing. Choose to grow. Those are my mottos that I share with you in the book, plus a few other quotes of favorite quotes. So that concludes my share on my chapter in America's Leading Ladies, Stories of Challenge, Courage, and Triumph. And I really appreciate your joining me here today. And I encourage you, if you're here as a guest and have not yet purchased the book, I strongly urge you to go to Amazon and purchase America's Leading Ladies. So let me ask you, does anybody have any questions or comments or a conversation they'd like to add to everything I've shared? Don't everybody speak at once. By the way, one of the things when you are giving a talk and you're going to be opening up for questions, here's a little trick. Nobody likes to ask the first question. Plant somebody. Say, Janet, I'm going to be giving a talk. Would you figure out while I'm talking something to ask? I have to tell you that on more than one occasion, I have been the rescuer of a speaker walking up to the microphone wondering, what can I ask when I get there? Because once the first person asks the first question, all of a sudden other people are willing to ask the question. So that's my little handy hint. If you are a speaker and opening up for questions, plant a questioner to ask that first question or make that first comment, whatever.
I have a question.
Okay.
How often do you have to travel to do your speaking?
I actually, well, right now, not at all.
Right. Okay.
I actually, Chris, that's Chris, right?
Yes.
I actually have not developed a big career as a public speaker, going out and getting, I'm not enamored, frankly, of getting on a plane and going somewhere to speak. I never was. And,
Right.
and really right now, I'm not in a position to do it. Forget the pandemic. My husband broke the femur in his left leg in January.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, I'm not leaving him home alone. He's not in, you know, so, and the thing is that there are so many other opportunities to speak beyond actually going somewhere and doing it in person. I mean, podcasts and interviews and creating videos. There's no necessity to act. I mean, if you want to build a public speaking career, certainly someday it'll come back again. But that's not something that I've been interested in doing for myself personally. I mean, I've certainly helped a lot of people with their presentations. But as I say, even if I wanted to do all that traveling, for me, it's no longer a possibility.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Any other thoughts, ideas?
Marjorie, I have a question for you. I'm a little bit curious about your volunteerism. Can you share with us a little bit about what you took from that and how you ended up there? That's not a career path many people choose.
Well, this is what happened. I actually was a teacher. I taught Russian and French in Birmingham Public Schools. That's Birmingham, Michigan. And when I finally got married, because in that era, the age I got married, I was considered an old maid. My husband actually was a widower with a 2- and 4-year-old child. So there was absolutely no way I would continue in a teaching career. So I became an instant mother to a 2- and 4-year-old. That's a whole story. And so, you know, my responsibility was to those children and helping to create a wonderful family. And then my definition, by the way, of mother's liberation is when your youngest child goes to school full day and does not come home for lunch. And even if at that time, even if I had wanted to go back to school and teach, we had hit a demographic dip. They were actually pink slipping teachers who had jobs. And fortunately, my income, another income was not necessary. And so I come from a family of volunteers. My mother was a volunteer. My late mother-in-law, you know, they were all involved in various organizations. And so I got active in the Sisterhood of my synagogue, and I got active in Hadassah, which is the hospitals in Israel. And I got active because I'm a singer and love music. I got active in the Detroit Symphony Orchestra and became president of the Volunteer Council. And so, and then I became a certified adult trainer for Women's League for Conservative Judaism, went around. Chris, that's when I did a lot of traveling. I was going around doing workshops for sisterhoods in the United States and Canada. And a lot of, you know, a lot of what people needed was communication. And not simply getting over the fear of speaking, but how to market themselves, how to attract new members, how to raise money. You know, I always say the hardest sell is getting people to donate to a worthy cause when the only thing they're getting in return is feeling good about what they did. And you really have to learn how to frame things. For example, for the Detroit Symphony Orchestra, there are a lot of people who don't care diddly squat about classical music, although the orchestra has a full pops and jazz season. But they also have a huge music education program, close to 1,000 kids doing classical and jazz. And so basically we promoted raising money for music education. And because it had been cut out of a lot of schools, a lot of people who didn't care about classical music per se, or the orchestra at all, still felt it was important for children to get music education. So that's the place I really learned the importance of how you frame what you're offering.
Okay.
Can you give us an example? I think Brian wants to ask a question, then Marjorie, then
Yeah, I do. Speaking of, it comes off of your, may I make a suggestion? When people come up to me and they say, can I ask you a question? I like to respond, you just did.
Yeah.
Anyways, with that being said,
if you don't want to come across as snarky as that, Brian, you can say, well, that kind of depends on the question.
Yeah, that's a good one too. And that's what I was leading into. Do you have other polite intros that you like to use to, create those conversations with people?
Yeah, well, when people ask, so what do you do? As I said, the second most asked question in the world after how are you? And of course, everybody just says fine, but you can't do that. What do you do? I like to kind of ask a question in return that will give me a notion of whether or not this person is somebody who would be interested in what I do. So my question, I call it asking a pain question. I said, my question is, have you ever been in a situation where you really wanted to say something and you couldn't get yourself to do it? And then did you beat yourself up afterward for missing a great opportunity? I have to tell you, he says yes, because what I do, everybody has trouble with is at some point or another. But and so what I do, and then when people say yes, I said, well, what I do is help people, who are concerned about sharing their messages, figure out what to say, and how to say it effectively, and to get over the fear of saying. And if you can come up with just a very short, summation of what you do like that, and then you just pause. And if they ask you questions, so forth and so on, and you can have a conversation, or if it goes nowhere, you can say, do you happen to know anybody who might need that kind of service? Whatever you're doing, this is what I call the soft referral request. When especially in networking, when you're meeting people, or just do you happen to know anybody? This way, you're never asking people for business. Do you happen to know of anybody who might be interested in that service? Not really. Well, if you do, I'd appreciate your keeping me in mind. Yeah. Just very, very soft. One of the things, this elevator pitch thing, which is how you answer, what do you do? It's really important not to memorize it per se, because then you sound like a robocall. And that's a big turnoff. The thing is, when you share with people what you do, you want to be just very conversational. I help people who are afraid of public speaking and who maybe aren't sure what to say or can't put together an effective message. I mean, I play around with it. I don't ever say it exactly the same so that I don't, yeah. And by the way, Brian, the other question I thought you were going to ask, what do you do when somebody asks you a question you can't answer?
That's a good
You
follow-up.
don't want to blow your authority and expert status. That's particularly the case when you are giving Chris, when you're out giving a talk, like you were referring to, or giving a speech, or if you're online, you're teaching an online course and you have a Q&A call. It's really important, in my opinion, not to try the fake it until you make it method. Because as one of my mentors said, everybody's BS meter is always on. And so people know when you're trying to fake it. And so the first thing, and my method, by the way, I have a little acrostic for it, ACED, A-C-E-D. A is for acknowledge. That's an interesting question. That's
what I do.
Hey, you hear people do this all the time. That's a very good question. They're buying themselves some time to figure out how to answer. You know? The C is for clarify. The truth is you cannot give a good answer to a bad question. And sometimes people's questions are so broad or so vague, I mean, you know, you couldn't answer it. And so you can say, you know, I'm not really sure what you mean by that. Could you give me an example of what you're asking about? And then just shut up and make them think about what they really want to ask. And then the E is for either elicit or if you're somebody else is around. So, you know, that's not something, if you're, especially if you're in a board meeting or something, or a group of people.
Yes, someone else, yes.
I've studied. Is there anybody else here who could answer this question? And then the D is for either deliver or delay. Either, you know, you get a channel, a gift from the stars, and the answer pops right into your brain and you deliver it, or you delay. Say, listen, you know, that's not something I'm up to date on right now. Let me get back to you, and then promise a time and do it. And the counterintuitive thing, now people, you know, our egos are so fragile. We think in order to be seen as an authority and expert, that we have to know everything. And so that's when people get into the fake it till you make it kind of thing. The counterintuitive fact is that when you are honest about not knowing something, that actually increases your authority and expert status.
Definitely.
Because people know that whatever you share with them is absolutely the truth as you understand it. That anything you share has passed your honesty and validity test, and that you're not going to, you know, try and pass off some half-baked answer that's not valid. And so, and the reality is that so few people are willing to say they don't know something because of our fragile human egos. When I was being trained as a certified adult trainer, our trainer, by the way, was the head trainer for the Girl Scouts of America. She said, she asked, what are the 4 most difficult words to pronounce in the English language? And we're all thinking, huh? I made a mistake.
Ah, yes.
For us as human beings to admit we don't know everything or that we made a mistake is not only really hard to do, but it's a very powerful thing to do. That when you can own your own mistakes, or own you don't know something and you're going to get back to somebody or make good on it, that increases people's faith in you. You talk about know, like, and trust. The fact of the matter is perfection is not relatable. It's not relatable. And your vulnerability and you're willing to say you don't know something, that's what's relatable. And when you get up and give a talk, I mean, how many times in this conversation today did I have to go back and you know, kind of, you know, I misspoke and had to correct myself? Just, it's part of being human. And that's what makes us relatable to people. when we come forward in all of our humanity, and I will tell you something, when you make a mistake and you're giving a talk, first of all, everybody in the audience feels badly for you, unless you come across like a self-centered narcissist or something. And the other thing is, they're so glad you're up there instead of them.
Yes, yes.
I have to tell you, and this is, I really need to conclude now, and I appreciate all of you being here. I have a friend who's who trained as a juggler. And he said the very first thing in the very first class that he took to become a juggler, the professor said, you will drop something. You will drop something. And think about it. If you've ever seen a juggler drop something, how do you feel? How does the audience react? Everybody feels so badly for that juggler. And when the juggler picks up whatever it is and starts juggling again, everybody is so happy. Very often they start applauding. So it's our mistakes that endear us to other people, not our perfection. Now, am I saying you should be sloppy on purpose and not prepare? Oh, no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying don't beat yourself up for not being perfect. That's my final word. Bust out of this jail of your comfort zone and enjoy coming into the power of your voice.
Thank you so much for your time today, Marjorie. You've been amazing. We could listen to you give us a little impromptu training course all day long,
Yes.
but your tips are great, and I think very relatable to everyone. It's like you said, it's not about public speaking. It's about all speaking and just communicating and networking and going through our daily lives. So
Yeah,
thank you for your wisdom.
I actually have a complimentary ebook that talks about a lot of this in addition to what's in the book. And seeing I'm one who believes in finding URLs that tell you what you get, you're going to love this URL. Overcomeyourspeakingfears.com.
That's awesome.
So,
thank you so much. I know
you.
you've got an appointment to run off to, so thank you again for your time, and we'll hope to see you again soon. For those of us who have a few more minutes, one of the things that I think Marjorie spoke of a little bit, thank you, Marjorie. Marjorie referenced change and baby diapers, which I'm sure you remember her comment, but it kind of brought me to something that I thought was a little bit related to what we were talking about today, and also obviously related to the book. But Pat Sampson wrote a great poem that she included in the book, literally called Change. And I think it's kind of apropos to what we are all dealing with in our daily lives right now with everything that's going on. It echoes what Marjorie said, that change is not easy. And I think we can all probably relate to it. So I thought I'd take a minute to share it with you. For those of you who have the book, I believe it's on about page 136 or so. But it's brief, but I think very poignant. It's called Change. It says, realize who you are, become what you must through newness may seem strange. Meet today with courage, tomorrow trust, and as you welcome the challenge of change. Something new may be meeting a need, and needs change as one grows. Many a change transforms a seed before it becomes a rose. But if the seed were to shrink from the sun and cling instead to the earth, the bud would never begun, nor would the rose find birth. Don't cling to fear with the tried and true. Remember, it too once was new. Greet life eagerly, ever knowing, ever changing is ever growing. And that was written by Pat Sampson, who spearheaded and was our fearless leader through the entire America's Leading Ladies book project. And I think it's poignant to both where we are today and some of what Marjorie said and what we've been talking about these past several weeks with what we're all experiencing and how we are pivoting in our lives and adjusting to new norms.